Hey guys, this is Big Communications. Welcome to my review of the 2015 horror film It Follows. Now, IMDb says it came out in 2014, but it was only released at the Sundance Film Festival and a few other film festivals in 2014. It did not get a wide release, at least in the United States, until this year. So I'm counting this as a 2015 film, not counting it as a 2014 film because it just came out in theaters just last Friday. So I don't really think it's a film that I honestly can say came out last year because it only came out at a film festival. I think IMDb really needs to fix that kind of their dates when it comes to that. Yeah, it came out for the first time ever in theaters at a film festival last year, but it didn't come out to the public. It only came out to people who had tickets for Sundance or these other film festivals. So it didn't come out in terms of a wide release until this year. So that's why I think the film should be listed on IMDb as a 2015 film. Same thing for the release date on Wikipedia. Um, if you don't do that, then you open up a whole can of worms and you confuse people. And they're like, "Hey, it says 2014, but it just came out in theaters this year." Yeah, because it did technically come out in 2014 in a few theaters, but here it came out in 2015 throughout a bunch of theaters, and that's why I'm listing it as a 2015 film. And I'm gonna keep it that way. But anyway, It Follows as a film I've been looking forward to seeing for a while now. I saw the trailer, it looked interesting to me. I liked the concept. The trailer wasn't giving away a lot, but it looked like it might be a. It definitely did spike my curiosity, so to speak. The score definitely did help as well because I really liked it. It reminded me a lot of old school John Carpenter, Alan Howarth scores. And so I was really looking forward to the film for the longest time. And I actually got the opportunity to check it out in theater on a Monday night, and it did not disappoint me. I thought it was every bit as good as the critics said it was, and then some. I thought it was one of the best horror films I have seen in a long time. I could probably say it's the best, my favorite film of the year so far. And it's gonna be kind of hard for other films to top it, but we'll see. I mean, Avengers 2 could take over the top spot. A few other movies I'm looking forward to, Mad Max Fury Road, that might be able to overtake it. But as it stands right now, and I haven't seen that many films from this year anyway, but this is my favorite film of this year, one of my favorite horror films I've seen in the past decade or so. I really did love that this film It Follows that much. Now I know this film has been getting a recent backlash from people who kind of said it's not scary, it's not a horror film, and that's if that's how you feel, that's fine with me. That's your opinion. You're entitled to it. If it's not technically a horror film, then it's still a damn good movie in its own right. But I personally feel it is a horror film. This is the type of horror film to me that scares me the most. And the type of boo scare type stuff, I think, the jump scares, I think it's been overplayed out. And I think if you were expecting this film to be a jump scare every minute, nonstop thrills and gore and blood and guts, then you're going to be disappointed because that's not what the film is. And that's not what I was expecting anyway from the trailer. I know some people I've read online have said that the film was advertised as a slasher, and I highly disagree with that. When I saw the trailer, I did not think it was going to be a slasher movie. I thought it was going to be a horror film with some supernatural elements and be a stylistic horror movie. That's what I thought it was going to be, and that's what the film actually was. I don't get the slasher film advertisement argument because I did not really see any of that in the trailers that I saw for the film. It looked more like a low-key supernatural horror movie, which is what the film is. So I thought the advertising was not false advertising. I thought the advertising for the film fit the movie really well. Um, and this is a film that from a director, David Robert Mitchell, who had never really done a horror film before. And all I gotta say is, give this guy some more work after this. Give him another chance to do another horror movie, because he just adds a whole new look to a horror film to me. He adds this very minimalist, but at the same time very beautiful in terms of its cinematography and very engaging and risky camera work and camera techniques. This is a really great young filmmaker who deserves a lot more work after this, and I hope he does get it because the guy knows what he's doing. He created some really spectacular shots in this film, 360-degree pans, there's just some shots that are just works of art in themselves. The scene in the pool where the blood pools up in the where the pool fills up with blood. The way that he shot it is just gorgeous, and that in itself could be just a work of art. You could take a picture of that and put it on a put and frame it and put it in an art gallery, and people would buy it. That's how impressive his direction is in this film. Now, all the other aspects of the movie worked pretty well too. I thought the cast for the most part was really solid. They felt like real people. They're teenagers, but they didn't feel like they were fake teenagers. To me, they felt like they were normal, regular teenagers that you could relate to, that you could see at your high school. It didn't feel like they were shoehorned into a certain category or a certain cliche. They were their own characters, and I like that about the film. I really like the performance by the lead Jay, who's played by Maika Monroe, and she's this very shy character, but you kind of she's an actress that definitely does have this unique look about her and her performance, and it's a character that she's a little bit endearing in some ways. And so when you follow her along this journey of terror, you definitely do feel for her and you want her to make it out of this alive, along with her friends, who I think are really kind of fun group of friends that are kind of quirky and they're a little bit weird and they're kind of the outsiders, the outcasts. They're not popular kids, and I like that aspect of the film too. Keir Gilchrist, who plays Paul, he did a good job with that. Kind of reminded me of myself in some ways. I'm the same sort of guy. I'm kind of shy when it comes to asking girls if even a girl that I might have a crush with. I don't know. I'm kind of shy about asking them out, and I don't know because I don't know how it's gonna work out. But I'm a nice guy, but it's just I don't really know how to handle that type of thing. Olivia Luccardi plays Yara, who I believe, oh, I think is her sister. I believe. I think it's her sister. I'm just checking. J. J. There's J. Yeah, Yara's her sister. And you have Lili Sepe, who plays Kelly Height, who's another friend of theirs. She's kind of sort of a nerdy girl. She has this really kind of really fascinating, I thought. Um, she has this shell, and I thought it was like a makeup compact mirror for a second, but it's like a Kindle or something. She's reading books out of this little compact shell Kindle or tablet. And I thought that was really interesting, really nice aesthetic choice for the film to use. And speaking of aesthetic and composition and visuals, uh, the director, David Robert Mitchell, he specifically has cited the works of George Romero and John Carpenter as influences on the way that he shot the film, and it definitely does show, especially Carpenter, with not only the score, because the score itself, I mean, the score by Disasterpiece, which was an amazing score. I love the soundtrack music the film used for its trailer by Disasterpiece, and I was thinking like, man, that's a really great piece of music. I don't know how they're going to top that. But they actually manage the film ends up having the entire score being just as memorable and just as great as that one piece of music. I thought the score by Disasterpiece is what elevated the film to another level for me. And much like John Carpenter and Alan Howarth's score for Halloween, it took a film that without the score would be a little not nearly as effective and made it the great film that it is. Um, and John Carpenter's Halloween was one of those films. The producers, when they were looking at the rough cut of the movie without the score, and even John Carpenter himself, were like, "This is not very impressive. There's a lot of great shots, and it looks visually appealing, but there's no suspense. It doesn't really feel like it's scary. It doesn't really feel like it's eerie. It doesn't really feel like a horror film. It's just kind of slow paced. There isn't much going on." And then when the score is added to Halloween, it just it just it's the last piece of the puzzle, so to speak. And that's definitely how I feel about It Follows. The score is one of the things that makes the movie. One of the many things that makes the movie. The great visuals by the director, the good performances by the cast and crew, um, and the concept itself are among other things that make the film, in my opinion, a great movie. But the score is also a very important part of that. And I think that this is a film that I can point out to some people who think that music and a score isn't nearly as important when it comes to making a good film. And I could say this film proves that concept wrong. I think, honestly, the importance of a score, a good score that fits the film like a glove, I think has been overlooked lately when it comes to a lot of films. And I think there's a lot of films that come out in theaters lately that just don't even have scores that are at all memorable, that don't even really register at all with you, and or stick with you. And I thought this is definitely an exception to that rule. This was an amazing score that I could listen to over and over again and not get tired of it. And just I really really adored the score for this film by Disasterpiece, and I really hope that they get another chance to score another horror film because they knocked it out of the park this time around. So anyway, yeah, I love this score, and I was really glad I was able to see the film in the theater and experience and hear the score, the pleasure to my ears that is the score by Disasterpiece in the best possible sound imaginable in the theater with the surround sound that only a theater can provide. It was a very unique experience. I won't forget it because the score is just it's a gorgeous score. It's a gorgeous, haunting synthesizer score that fits the film perfectly, and it adds another level to the movie. It makes in my opinion, the score is what gave the film a lot of its atmosphere, a lot of its mood, and a lot of its eerie qualities was the score. The score itself gave the film this ethereal, eerie quality to it that I don't think would be there without the score. Now, so yeah, the score is great. The cinematography is also fantastic by Mike Koulakis. The editing I thought was pretty solid too by Julio C. Perez the fourth. And as I said, the cast I thought they did a pretty solid job. Now, and the direction was fantastic by David Robert Mitchell. And the screenplay I thought was very clever by David Robert Mitchell, who also wrote the screenplay. And he actually, a little bit of trivia about the film is that the concept derives from a recurring nightmare that director Robert David Mitchell used to have, where he would be stalked by a predator that continually walks slowly towards him. And that's just a creepy idea. And the film itself, I think, has it's a really grand idea for a horror film. And the main gist of the plot is this, that there is this entity that for some reason, through sexual intercourse, it it ends up transferring its attention to you. So it follows you, and it will eventually kill you if you don't pass it along to the next person. And so in a way, I interpreted this as a ghostly STD. That's what it is. It's the worst type of STD possible. I mean, fuck herpes, genital warts, those suck. But this is a ghostly entity that can take on the form of anyone, living or dead. Anyone. It could be someone you know. It could be your mother. It could be your father. It could be your brother. It could be your sister. It could be your uncle. It could be your dead grandmother. It could be a complete stranger. It could be the little kid who is across the way from you. It could be your postman. It could be anybody. And that to me is truly terrifying. And this film tapped into a fear which I think honestly all of us have. The fear of being watched, the fear of being followed by someone or something. And I think it's a fear that all of us have, and we might not realize it. But if this scenario happened to all of us, I think we would be pretty freaking terrified if we were in the shoes of the characters in this film. I think we would be just as scared as they are. I think we would be just as scared as the lead Jay Height is. And that's the thing. At least I would be. And that's because that's the type of fear that really gets me the most. This the paranoia horror. The paranoia horror just terrifies me. And that's one of the reasons why I really love John Carpenter's The Thing, because it really does tap into that type of terror. And this film does that and does it the best I've ever seen since John Carpenter's The Thing. And it just, the film just made my anxiety level go through the roof while I was watching it. I thought it was full of nail-biting suspense. It's a slow build. Yes, it's a slow burn. Some people might call it boring, but to me, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I was captivated by the movie. Like I said, my anxiety levels going through the roof, and I think the fact that I needed to take a piss did add to it a little bit because I was like, I gotta piss, I gotta pee, but I don't want to miss anything. And then it's just the film itself is so chock full of this paranoia horror that the adding the fact that I needed to take a piss really bad just made it even more um it made my anxiety level even more higher, so it made it go through the roof even higher than it already was. So I'd probably recommend make sure you empty your bladder before you see this movie, so you're not like even more on edge than you already will be if you check this film out. I mean, I'm not saying that you will be on edge. I mean, some people aren't. Some people find this film to be boring. Some people find it not to be scary, and to each their own. But to me, this film was scarier. This film was more horrifying than the Paranormal Activity films. This film to me was scarier than a gore movie. This film was scarier to me than Hostel or a Serbian film or things like that. This film was downright terrifying to me. I was looking behind my shoulder after it was over. When there was somebody who got up in the middle of the movie and was walking around. I was looking around. I was like, oh, okay, all right, it's just one of the guys in the theater. But I didn't remember him coming into the theater. So it was one of those like, holy shit, is it following me? But no, of course not. It's just playing tricks with my mind. And that is the type of film that sticks with me. That's the type of horror film that truly scares me, is a movie like this that adds a bit of realism and reality to this scary concept, to the horror. It adds a bit of realism to the horror. I thought this concept was kind of plausible because if this is an entity that only you can see and no one else can see it and it could easily be plausible because and you could easily think about it, this entity could actually exist and none of us would ever know about it because the people who would die and being killed by it, there's no witnesses, there's no suspect. It's just some ghostly entity that fucking finally catches up with you, follows you, finds you, kills you, you're dead. There's no motive, there's no anything, there's nothing. It's an unexplained death. And that's not going to show up in the newspapers. Nobody's going to know how you died. Nobody's going to know what happened to you. And the only thing that and nobody would believe you if you did survive. If you did survive this thing and you did pass it along to another person and you tried to talk about it to other people you know, nobody would believe you. They think you're nuts. They think you're crazy. So this is the type of concept to me that is eerily and terrifyingly plausible to me. And that's what makes the film even more terrifying to me, even more horrifying, is the fact that this could possibly potentially happen, and none of us would ever know about it, and none of us would ever believe the person if they told us that it did happen to them, but it could have actually happened. And that's, to me, is really, really spine chilling. And yeah, I thought the film I thought it was every bit as scary and every bit as terrifying as a lot of the critics had said it was. And maybe it's because this is the type of horror that I fear the most, is this type of horror, like the horror, the this kind of what it reminded me of a lot of the scares that the film was doing, with the entity taking on the form of an old lady, or taking on the form of an older man, or naked men, or other people, or so forth. It was it reminded me of the uncomfortable horror that I experienced watching Exorcist 3, a very underrated film directed by William Peter Blatty. And that film also dealt with older people. It dealt with having the horror brought to you by something that you would never expect would ever harm you. Like the older guy, or the guy in the wheelchair is incapacitated at a nursing home. And that's what happened in Exorcist 3, and that's kind of what happens here with It Follows. The entity takes on the form of just us. Us. It takes on the form of humans. It doesn't take on the form of a demon. It doesn't take on the form of a goblin. It doesn't take on the form of some crazy looking monster. It takes on the form of us. And I think that is truly terrifying. And that had me on edge throughout the entire movie, because I'd see in the corner of my eye, I'd see somebody walking behind the characters. I'm like, it's right there, it's right behind you. And then they turn around and you said you see that lady, you see that girl? It's like, yeah, we see it. I'm like, oh, thank God. But then that's just only a little bit. That's a little bit of relief, because the film just continuously, in my opinion, effectively built this sense of dread and this sense of unrelenting paranoia that just makes you want to tear your hair out, or tear your head off, or fucking scream at the top of your lungs. It just does an excellent job building this paranoia, and paranoia to me is the ultimate in terror for me personally. And that's why the film is just so much more effective to me. And I think some people just, I guess they don't find that to be scary. I think some people are confusing the term scary or horror film with surprises. I think that's happening a lot lately with horror films. Some people are confusing stuff like boo scares and stuff like boo with actual scares. If I actually scared you, I think it's only because we are used to using the term scare when it comes to being surprised. When it comes to being startled, when it comes to being shocked, we as a collective society, we're used to using the term scared. It's become something that it's normal to us. It's second nature to say, "Oh my God, you scared me," or "You almost scared me to death." But in reality, are we really being scared? Are we really kept up at night by people startling us? Are we really kept up at night by boo scares or jump scares in horror films? No, to me, what I'm kept up at night is stuff like It Follows, about some entity that will follow you around and it just keep following you. Every time you look behind you, you're just hoping you don't see what's following you, but it's still following you. And the only way you'll know whether or not it's the entity is that if other people around you can't see it. And then by saying that, do you see that? People are like, no, I don't see anything. You'd be like, oh my God, I'm going nuts. I'm going crazy. I'm losing it. But then it could be, like I said, it could be anybody. And you can mistake the person following you behind you as your friend or something for the entity. And it could be, but then it could not be. And you wouldn't know the difference until you're fucking dead. That to me is more terrifying than boo scares, than jump scares. That to me is true horror. That to me is what is truly scary. And there are multiple different interpretations of what horror is. And I'm okay with however anybody seems to feel or think about what horror to them is. But I think honestly, we and a lot of horror films and horror fans, I think we are confusing jump scares for what it means to be a horror film, and I think that's a mistake. I think some of the most effective horror films to me, The Exorcist, this film, um, Exorcist 3, Robert Wise's The Haunting. Those are scary to me because of the fact that they allow you to use your imagination to fill in the blanks, to create the terror for you. Or they're a terror that is human, that is real, that you can, or like John Carpenter's The Thing, for instance. You don't know who might be the thing. It could be your friend. It could be the thing, and then and unless you know how to come up with some test to just know for sure if it's the thing or not, it might already be too late. That to me is truly terrifying. That is something that keeps me up at night. That is something that sticks with me. That's something that truly scares me, that gives me the chills, that makes my spine tingle. A jump scare, it surprises me, it startles me, but it doesn't make me truly scared. It doesn't truly scare me. It's not true. It isn't something that's truly horrifying to me. And but that's just my thoughts on that issue. And to bring up one last thing on that, when we have a surprise birthday party, when you have a surprise birthday party, you're coming home from work, or you're coming from wherever, and you open the door, and and your friends and family, they go all in unison, turn on the light, surprise! You're like, whoa, oh my God, it's been so normal for us to say, oh my God, you scared me. Thank you, thank you. I'm so surprised. But the term is surprise birthday party. It's not scare birthday party. It's not startled birthday party. It's a surprise birthday party. And I think jump scares in horror films are just like a jack in the box. They don't really honestly keep you up at night. They just surprise you. And I think we're confusing surprises with real horror. At least that's my personal opinion on that issue. And I think we look at like surprises and so forth, like the game of perfection. Remember that game? That little, I mean, that game, where you set a timer and you try to put all these pieces into place before the timer goes off. And if you don't do it, it makes this loud buzz noise and everything, and all the pieces fly into the air. Well, to me, that's what I think some people think scary movies are nowadays. A game of perfection. And I think horror films are a lot there's a lot more to horror films than just a game of perfection to me. There's a lot more to horror films than just surprises and gore and blood. And that's why I think this film is so effective to me, because it is one of those horror films. It's more than just that. And I think some people look at it and think it's not scary. And to each their own. But I think maybe it's because they were expecting the horror film to be like a game of perfection. And to me, horror films, really honestly, that's not what a horror film is to me. A horror film to me isn't just a bunch of surprises and blood and gore and guts. To me, a horror film is something that sticks with you. Is something that will scare you long after you've seen the movie. And It Follows is definitely one of those films for me. It's lingering in my head to this day. I couldn't, I had a hard time sleeping the night I saw it, because it just stuck with me. I stayed up at night. And yeah, it's definitely an effectively terrifying film for me. And yeah, I haven't really spoiled very much, except the fact that there's the ghostly STD and there's so forth and so on. I might go in depth more when the film comes out on Blu-ray, when I will definitely pick it up, and then I'll go in even more in depth on the movie. But I wanted to do this review and not try to not to spoil as much as I possibly can. I'm not going to talk about the ending, even though it's open-ended, and I just thought I'd just share my thoughts on what I liked about the film, which was a lot of things, and a little bit of my thoughts on why I feel the film is personally scary to me. I think the film is a great horror movie. But other than that, I'm going to leave the rest to you. So you can check it out for yourself later, and see if it's right up your alley, or if it's not up your alley. For me personally, I love the film. It's one of my favorite films. It's my favorite film of the year so far. I think it's one of the best horror films I've seen in a while. I think it's another film that proves that the independent horror genre is kicking the collective ass of the mainstream horror films that are coming out through major studios. And I'm glad this movie made some money. It was made for $2 million, which the film did an amazing job with its low budget. And it's made about 7.5 million, so it hasn't made a huge hit, but it's made some profit, which I'm glad it did. And I'm pretty sure it'll make more profit when it comes out on home video. and on demand. And if the film sounds interesting to you and it sounds like an idea that is intriguing and the film sounds like it might be a good movie, then I highly recommend you give it your money and check it out in the theater before it gets taken out of theaters, because I think it's a very unique experience, and especially with the score and with the way that the film is shot and everything. And I I can't praise the film enough. I love the movie. I loved every minute of it. The ending, yeah, you could say it's kind of downbeat and it's bleak, but the film earned it. This is a movie that earned that type of ending. Just like John Carpenter's The Thing earned a downbeat ending, this earned a downbeat ending. It having any other type of ending, considering the way that the plot was unraveling, really would not have worked. At least personally for me. I don't think it would have worked nearly as well. And I do see the allegories that people do make, that it's about death and how death follows you and you should learn to live your life and just accept the fact that death is going to come for you. But I honestly think that's looking a little bit more in depth into the film. That really, I just I personally feel the film is simply an allegory about sexually transmitted diseases. They follow you to the till you die, but this is one of the deadliest ones of them all. And I thought that was a very clever concept, something I'd never seen a horror film do. The film managed to finally do something new with the horror genre and make a horror film about an STD. I mean, there might be some other horror movies that deal with that concept, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. So in that regard, I think the film is actually unique and it's actually original and it's actually a horror film that does something new with the genre. And yeah, it's definitely an understated horror movie. It's definitely a horror film that's a bit minimalist. It's a horror film that isn't full of blood and guts. There's a little bit of it in the beginning. It's effectively brutal, with effects by Robert Kurtzman, but there's not much in that regard. It's not going to deliver the blood. It's not going to deliver the guts. If you're expecting that, if you're expecting a slasher movie, then you're not going to like this movie. This is not a slasher film. This is a artistic, stylistic, minimalist, supernatural horror movie. So if you're expecting a slasher movie with the blood and the guts, and you're not gonna like it. If you're expecting jump scares every minute, you're not gonna like it either. But I thought it was still effectively scary, and it still had some effective jump scares that made me jump out of my seat that were not really related to the supernatural aspects of the film, because that's mostly what makes me jump, is the stuff that's not related to the supernatural aspects of the film. It's just like a ball hitting a window and surprising the hell out of me. But yeah, like I said, surprising the hell out of me. Personally, I want to call them jump surprises now. I want to call them surprises. I don't really want to call those moments in a horror film scares anymore, because I think it's honestly what is cheapening a horror film lately and is making horror films less of films that stick with you, less of films that haunt your dreams, and more of horror films that are just there to get your adrenaline up. It's there to get your heart racing a bit, and it's there to surprise you more than actually scare you. And I think It Follows is definitely one of those films that scares you. It sticks with you. It makes you afraid of it long after it's over. It makes you want to avoid sex altogether. You don't want to do it. You don't want to get the dirty dick. You don't want to do it because who knows, some fucking entity might follow you later, and it's a no, it's a terrifying concept. Just the concept of a ghostly STD is horrifying to me, and also the concept of the fact that you can't get rid of it. The only way you can get rid of it is pass it along to someone else. But if they don't get rid of it, if they don't pass it along, then you're fucked anyway. So it's one of those situations where it's just like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's a very horrifying concept. You're in a no-win scenario. You can't win, you can't beat this, and that's what's really horrifying about the movie. It's a film that earned its not so happy ending. But anyway, I really don't know what else to say about It Follows, except kudos to David Robert Mitchell for writing and directing what I consider a masterful film. Kudos to Disasterpiece. Huge kudos to Disasterpiece for creating one of the most memorable scores I've heard since the days of John Carpenter and Alan Howarth. And kudos to the cast and crew for this film. They're doing a fantastic job performance-wise. And kudos to the director for using the slums of Detroit, using the dilapidated houses and buildings of Detroit to to great effect. And really, it was a great location to use of Detroit, and it's a unique location too. How many horror films can you think of that take place in Detroit? So I think it actually was a good choice on the director's part to have it take place in Detroit, because I drove through those slums. I drove through those neighborhoods, and they look scary. They look like it's something that you don't want to be. It looks like a place you don't want to be, and it's like a modern day ghost town. They're like they're the ghost towns in a city, and I think that's pretty creepy. And it's a good choice for the film. And I thought the film had plenty of mood. I thought it had plenty of atmosphere, and had mood and atmosphere in spades. And the film, just like I said, I thought it just I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It had me on edge all throughout the movie. I didn't know what to expect half the time. I was discombobulated, and right from the get-go, and it didn't let go. It just kept going, and I went along for the ride. And it's definitely one of the most nerve-wracking and nail-biting, suspenseful, and horrifying films I've seen in recent years. And yeah, I really don't know what to say about It Follows, except we'll see how well if it holds up with a second viewing when it comes out on Blu-ray, and I will speak more in depth on the film then and talk about specific scenes that I really liked and so forth. But I don't really want to give those away at this moment in time, because the movie just came out. But anyway, if this sounds interesting to you, if the film sounds like it might be your idea of a good time, then give it a look. I recommend it. Um, anyway, I don't know what else to say about It Falls except it was rated out of 5 stars. I can't give it anything less than 5 out of 5. I personally didn't find anything wrong with the film. Personally, for me, I know I sound like a homer. I sound like I'm sucking the movies. You know what? But I mean it. I personally love this movie. I'd be lying to you if I honestly said I had any issues with it. I didn't. I didn't see the plot holes that people saw. I didn't see. I didn't find. I personally found the film to be terrifying, so I wasn't one of those people that found it not to be scary. I wasn't bored. I was not bored at all. I could not take my eyes off the screen. I needed to take a piss, and I didn't take it until after the movie was over. That shows how much and I was invested into the film. And so yeah, I was definitely one of those people that loved it. So anyway, I really don't know what to say about It Follows, except thanks for watching my review, and I will see you guys later. See ya.